Is ISIS operating in South Africa? 11 people are now on trial for a suspected terror attack in Verulam, KwaZulu-Natal. One of the 14 charges they're facing, terrorism. But we hear little to nothing from officials about efforts to deal with terror. So are we unaware of the extent to which terror movements are growing here, or are we just getting ahead of ourselves? Tonight we're joined by Islamic scholar Shaykh Ighsaan Taliep. He's joining us from our Cape Town studio. And head of the Africa desk at the Terrorism Research and Analysis Consortium, Jasmine Opperman, joins us via Skype. And of course, we have you, Naeem Jeenah, with me here in the studio to talk about this more from the Afro-Middle East desk. Let me start off with you, Jasmine Opperman. How big is this threat in South Africa?
I think one has to be very specific in terms of a threat. It is minority. It's small numbers. If we want to talk about numbers, we are talking a bit about individuals that initially were falling for their propaganda campaign, that were willing to move to the caliphate and join them, then returning. We have seen ISIS presence in South Africa with recruitment, and we've seen ISIS presence in terms of spreading the ideology. But the audience is small and limited and must not be overstated.
All right. You talked about people coming back. I know that some South Africans, women, men and children went over to Syria and then came back. I mean, that's surely a concern.
It is a concern.
It's not a sort of place you go on holiday at the moment.
Exactly. It is a concern in terms of their ideological conviction. The concerning factor more now is how to deal with these people coming back. We've seen in Europe how they're currently dismally failing and struggling on how to deal with foreign fighters returning. And the question to be answered now is South Africa in a position with a soft approach in terms of de-radicalization of these individuals and making sure we're on track with their activities? That is the crucial factor here. The fact that they have returned, not so much the concern, is what we are doing with those that return that is central to the solution of this problem.
Shaykh Taliep, what are you hearing in your community?
Jane, I must apologize. I really can't hear very well.
Okay, I want to know what you're hearing in your community about.
Very, very well.
Okay, can you hear me now? I want to know about the recent attacks that we've seen in Durban. Also, Jasmine was talking about South Africans who've gone over to Syria and have come back. So I'm just wondering what the conversation is, if there's concern.
Okay, so firstly, I think as far as we are concerned in the Muslim community, of course, we are very concerned about what have transpired of individual cases where people have gone over to join ISIS. Those were the very reasons why the scholars and especially the informal judiciaries have really embarked on extensive educational campaigns, and the positions have been very, very clear about the condemnation of ISIS as a group. So from a South African perspective, those kinds of educational programs and campaigns have been very, very effective in our view, in the sense that it had been rolled out extensively across the breadth of the country and really representative of all the ulama or Islamic scholar organizations and informal judiciaries across the country. And the fact that we've heard of intentions of return also by one individual, for example. Yes, these were concerns that, of course, we also looking at very, very closely.
Naeem Jeenah, should we be worried?
Look, as Jasmine said, I mean, there's been a number of South Africans who went, a number of them who came back. We try to track all of these people quite carefully, and the vast majority of those who returned were families who went, not fighters. Those who went to fight, many of them remained behind, and many of them have been killed. There are a few that still survive, and they are generally in custody of SDF or other such groups in Syria. The point is that South Africa has been, let's say, a target for recruitment. And when we say a target for recruitment, we think that less than 100 South Africans have actually gone over to Syria, and some of them have returned.
That's a pretty big number if you think of the potential for damage once they've been radicalized.
But as I said, the majority or a large number of them were families with children, and they went because of some romantic notion of living in an Islamic society, etc., not to fight. So yes, there is some element of that ideology behind it. Many of them, have been so despondent that they don't want to talk about it anymore. The point is that while it might have been a target for recruitment, South Africa remains, as far as we're concerned, and from what we're hearing from ISIS people that deal with South Africa, that South Africa remains a country that is not a target for operations.
Why is that?
And so, well, for a few reasons. One is that they feel that South Africa, from previously, is more useful as recruiting ground than for operations. Secondly, that they don't believe that it serves any good purpose for them to carry out operations in South Africa. South Africa is generally not seen as a country that is, for example, against the Palestinian cause, is not a country that has supplied troops to in Somalia and various other such things. So their position remains, and right up to yesterday, that has been their position. They've disavowed or claimed no link whatsoever to the group, the 11 that are under arrest at the moment. And you know that with terrorism, the big thing is, of course, to claim responsibility, even if you didn't do it. In this case, they're saying they had nothing to do with it. These guys are not part of their group. They don't believe that they have ISIS flags. Whether they do or not is besides the point.
It's probably not a big enough for them. Shaykh Taliep, what is this romantic notion that Naeem was talking about that drives some Muslims to places like Syria to be immersed in the sort of ISIS culture and the way they operate? And what does it suggest that they're possibly lacking here at home?
So, of course, from I think Jasmine Opperman also, the researchers going into this, a lot of kind of theories are obviously postulated as to why people would be inclined to do this. For us, I think, there's just these individuals, and it is quite telling that one of these individuals that we know of that have left was in fact an Islamic scholar. And this person had he had left, and he had, as we had known at the time, had been involved in also trying to recruit. It is telling, though, that after a year or two, he wanted to return, and his story was a 180-degree about turn of his experience, and he had condemned ISIS to oblivion and beyond. And this individual has, in terms of his own, understanding and really his theological background, been yearning and a kind of in a sense, of what is happening, especially in the Muslim world, and invasions of countries, kind of identified as if this is some kind of a justice. Of course, when they then landed over on that side, they were rudely awakened, and this is, of course, what we as the ulama or the Islamic scholar formations have been, again, been very vociferous about in terms of educational campaigns, that there's no linkage whatsoever of the kind of claims and the kind of conduct on the part of an organization like ISIS to be reconciled and representative of the faith and the Muslim community.
Okay, so I'm going to
those kinds of notions,
I'm going to jump in here quickly because we've got a caller on the line, Jacob from Social Nguve. Go ahead, Jacob.
Okay. Hello. Hello, you're speaking to Jacob Melanzi.
Yeah, go ahead, Jacob. What's your question?
Yes, I just wanted to comment on this topic that you are saying.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I believe, I'm a Muslim myself. I'm calling from Soshanguven. I don't agree with this ISIS. They are no ISIS. ISIS has been created by the Jews, or I can say the Americans, just to put Islam on a bad name. I mean, I'm saying all this because I'm doing research. I'm the follower of Sheikh Abdul Qadir Al-Murabit, and we do research on those things. We do research. I'm singing around here, but I do read a lot of books about it.
Okay, let's put that to Jasmine. I mean, there's a lot of debate about America's behavior and who they supported in Iraq and Syria that led to the creation of these terrorist groups. What do we know about ISIS? I mean, they've been decimated in so many parts of the world, and we are seeing a growing number of lone attacks, aren't we? Where does this leave them, though?
I think what we need to understand, first and foremost, just to respond to your viewer's question, policy failure cannot be denied in terms of being a trigger for extremist behavior. I am not going to go into the debate of actually where it originated and conspiracy theories related to that. The Americans, for the last 10 years, have declared 3 times now total victory over the Islamic State. We go back to the Al-Qaeda in Iraq, Islamic State in Iraq, and now the Islamic State in Al-Sham. 3 times, and yet the Islamic State is still present. They have adopted this strategy in Syria, and more specifically Iraq. They've returned to guerrilla warfare. They've returned to small cells. They've returned to small cell attacks, and they remain an ever-present threat in that specific area. If we look at the Western countries, and if you look at al-Baghdadi's latest speech, clearly lone wolf attacks is the way to go, no matter how many people get killed. But the focus remains on the Middle East and the Western states, and not South Africa. And I think that needs to be emphasized. South Africa has not featured once in any propaganda poster, and there are thousands of them, showing that their focus areas have not shifted. That does not mean we have not Islamic State presence. My concern in what is happening in South Africa now since yesterday is that there are triggers being created. Suddenly the Sunni-Shia divide is being put on the table, as in the same context as in the Middle East. We cannot do it. We do not have an extremist, violent culture similar to those regions. We need to define the threat of Islamic State in South Africa very specifically.
Okay, all right, so that's good news. It's good, good to hear, and let's not try and create it. Let's not sort of exacerbate something or create something that's not there. But there has been a few incidences, and we've got the case underway in Durban. So there is a threat. I believe they're from Tanzania. I don't know why they would come here, how they would assimilate in the community. How should we be reading what happened in Durban and the targets?
Look, I think what we're seeing in Durban is a very interesting thing. The fact that there's Tanzanians who seem to be the main group within this 11, a couple of people from DRC, some other countries, and a few South Africans. I think, quite apart from the issue about whether they're linked to ISIS or not, I don't see any evidence for that. But it seems to me that initially what happened was there was a specific anti-Shia attack against that mosque. It seems to be sectarian. Again, there isn't enough evidence for it, etc. But I think that seems to be the case. And then you had these incendiary devices in other parts of Durban that were set off, creating a clear link to the mosque attack. And then there's this issue of extortion. So particularly it seems the Tanzanians among this group of 11 are part of some extortion racket, held some Tanzanian business person hostage, asking for ransom, etc.
So making a bit on the side.
So making a bit on the side. So it's perhaps a sectarian element here mixed in with some criminality, with a few business people, the Tanzanian as well as the South African who's involved. And I think that's what's happened. And as Jasmine says, let's take it for what we're seeing on the face of it and for the evidence that's provided, and not jump to conclusions. I think that what we're seeing on the face of it is dramatic enough that we don't have to extend that to conclusions about global conspiracies.
No, and don't let them stoke circuit anymore. We've got another call on the line. Sizwe from Pietermaritzburg, go ahead.
Thank you for taking my call. Just a quick one. I notice you guys are discussing a very important issue when it comes to national security. However, my question is, how is it that the Department of Home Affairs was left outside? It's not part of this discussion since they are responsible. Well, in my view, they play a key role when it comes to national security of South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sizwe. That's why we've got somebody like Jasmine in and you in who can give us a broader picture of possibly what's missing. Jasmine, do you want to comment on that?
I think it's a very valid question. I think at the end of the day, all departments have a crucial role to play, Home Affairs being responsible for passports. And we do know that passports have been exploited in the past, have been misused and abused by specific individuals, like Samantha from being linked to Al-Shabaab is a very classic case that was present in South Africa, and it remains a vulnerable factor for people to be able to move in and out of South Africa with links to extremist groups, and that is a matter that requires serious attention, is a matter that we cannot even debate. I think it's fact. It needs to be looked at from a terror perspective at a very serious level.
Okay, noted. Thank you very much for that. Jasmine Opperman, Naeem Jeenah and Shaykh Taliep. Up next, we have the team who say they can create a stunting free future for South Africa's children.